today I'll be telling you a story from Africa. The title of the story is The Prince. Once upon a time, there was a king. As the king grew older and closer to his grave, he longed for a successor, but none could be found. It wasn't as if there were no men or women in the land, but a proclamation had been made and it had to be followed to the letter. The one who kept all the laws in the land was to be the next king. The selection process was difficult, and nobody in the entire kingdom was competent enough to accomplish this task. And so the service of a highly skilled kingmaker was contracted. The search for a prince had begun, and the search for a man who had not broken the law. The applicants came in their hundreds. Out came young men, tall, short, rich, and poor. They came from all parts of the kingdom, with references and resumes a mile long. At the end of the screening exercise, the number was down to 7. 7 good men, all potential kings, with impeccable moral standing in the society. But the search went further than that. Indeed, the laws were many, and whom the kingmaker wanted was a candidate that could look him in the eye and say they had never lied, cheated, or harbored evil thoughts against another person. It was like he told the applicants at the beginning of the selection, the law was like a river. It had depths that could not be seen. In the end, all 7 prospects were disqualified. But one day, wanting to take a break from his search, the kingmaker decided to go swimming in the royal pool. There, he saw a young man coming out of the pool. The kingmaker immediately spotted his courage and his charisma, and he wondered why he didn't see him during the screening. He beckoned to one of the palace guards and asked, "Who is that young man? He looks like a king and he carries himself like one." "But he isn't interested in being king," the guard said. "Why do you say this?" the kingmaker asked. "Because he is the son of the king." "You mean the king has a son and no one told me? Call the royal trumpeters, sound the horns, our search is over." So off he went to the palace to meet with the king. The king heard the trumpets too. He had lived for that moment and prayed it wasn't a hoax. "Greetings, my wise king. Greetings, my loyal one. Is my joy misplaced?" "You didn't tell me about your son," the kingmaker said. If you had, we wouldn't have embarked on the fruitless quest we just did." "But the laws demand, wise king, what the law wise king, what law is greater than the law that states that the son of a king is a king himself?" "A lion begets a lion, your majesty. There is no greater law than this." The king needed a few minutes to assimilate his good fortune. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how true the kingmaker was. Every good father must give an inheritance to his children. The king sent for his son, and they embraced. It was like he was seeing Leonardo for the first time, and he had only one man to thank for this. "My loyal one," he said to the kingmaker, "thank you for finding the prince. You have made me the happiest man in the world." "Your Majesty," the kingmaker said, "I didn't find him. He was here all along." That is the end of my story.
I would like to share a story with you. So it's like a fairy tale. once upon a time, it happened in Africa. There has a king, and as the king gets older, he needs to find someone to take his place to be a prince. But unfortunately, he doesn't have any sons and daughters. So that's why the royal family needs to select the candidate from all around the country. And after they have searched all of the country, they find there has 7 candidates. The people, they said they are like very qualified for to take the king's position. So, but after that, they still cannot find the right person, because 1 or 2 or 3, all of 7, they don't even to fit the one the right thing. So after that, one day the king went out to go to the swim, and at the swimming pool, he saw the young man who has a good looking, and he's very handsome, and he's a good swimmer, and he thought he might know him before, and he looks so familiar to him. So he told the royal family maybe he found the right person to be the prince, to take his position, to be a king in the future. And then the royal family who searched the young man and who brought him to their castle, and then the young man who became the king forever, and they just lived happily forever. That's the end.
It's a beautiful story, very African. I have an African story to tell you. Once upon a time, there was an African king.
Mm-hmm.
He was quite old. He didn't have a successor. And so the kingmakers, they came together to try and get him a successor. So they went into town.
Mm-hmm.
They gathered all the able young men. They assessed everybody, but they couldn't basically find a successor.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day he goes to swim in a swimming pool, and he now saw a young man. Mm-hmm. He looked at him and said, okay, this may be the guy. And he went back home and told the kingmakers. And so they invited the young man, and they assessed him and discovered that he was a good fit. And he inherited the throne, and they lived happily ever after.
Oh, that's a great story.
Wonderful story.
Hi, I want to share a story with you. I just heard a day before, and it is about an African king who was looking for, as he was getting old, he was looking for a new king for his kingdom. He was a very famous king and wanted a very loyal person who could take good care of his kingdom. So he looked everywhere, performed a lot of competitions and things, but he could not find. But one day he went to the swimming pool and he found a he found a man there, and he felt like he would be a good fit for it, as he was very kind towards all the people. And then he invited him for the dinner at his palace, and then he was made the new king.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Thank you for being a part of this experiment. If, like me, you noticed that the story had changed from when I first told it, and now I'm hearing it for the final time, then you're right. It did change.